As I'm beginning to prepare for the coming growing season, I thought I'd take this opportunity to share an overview of how all of my gardens and explorations worked out last season. Overall, 2017 was a good year for the Red Gardens project, despite feeling a frustration that I wasn't able to achieve everything that I set out to, or to be able to work full time on this project. The first half of the growing season was slightly warmer and drier than usual, which caused some failed germination even with the extra work of watering. The second half was slightly cooler and with more rain than we usually get, which delayed the ripening of some crops. But I felt that all of this was within the normal variations of weather that I have experienced on this site and fairly normal for this maritime climate. The frosts were neither too late or too early, and I didn't notice any particular issues with excessive pests or disease pressures. So I can't really claim that any of the failures that I had in the garden were due to factors outside of my control. But on the other hand, I can reasonably assume that any of the successes that I did have were likely due to my own efforts and not unusually good weather conditions. The family scale gardens, which form a large part of this project, keep getting better and more extensive. I now manage 7 gardens, each with a different method or approach for growing food on 100 square meters or 1,000 square feet of land. The polytunnel garden continues to be my favorite garden, and not just because it's the only one I can grow tomatoes and cucumbers in. It is also highly productive, but I need to do more work on succession cropping to get the most out of this protected microclimate, especially over winter. Inconsistent watering remains an issue for this covered space, and was a likely cause for some nutritional deficiencies last summer, and I think it's finally time I installed a more automated watering system. A few crops in the extensive garden were disappointing, including the direct sown squash plants, which didn't have a chance to ripen. In the last few seasons, I have been trying to squeeze in fast-growing crops in with the main crops, but I've found that this often crowds out and delays the development of the main crops, so I'm planning to focus on one crop at a time in this garden, and to not worry about the empty spaces of the beds. I also need to get another soil test done so that I can adequately mineralize this garden, which is a core aspect that I've neglected. I didn't double dig all of the beds in the intensive garden this past season, cutting back on the amount of work, as the soil has loosened quite a bit over the previous seasons. I've also reduced the amount of compost added to each bed, but they've continued to produce quite high yields. I really need to establish some kind of temporary protection for crops in the spring and autumn in addition to fleece covers. They are needed to try to get a succession of crops each season in order to really push the productivity of this garden and to keep in line with the ethos of this intensive method. Last year, I substantially changed the method that I use for managing the no-dig garden, moving away from the deep litter mulch and trying a few other methods for managing the beds. I've adopted Charles Dowding's method for mulching with finished compost rather than with undecomposed organic matter on 1/4 of the garden. It would be great if I had enough compost to try this method for the full garden, but limited supplies have given me a chance to experiment with some other no-dig approaches as well. The polyculture garden is finally starting to work for me. I'm getting the hang of the frequency of thinnings needed to manage the broadcast sown polycultures, and slowly figuring out the appropriate densities and which plants work well together. Even though there is a lot more exploration needed, this garden is already really productive, and I wonder how much more productive it can get. A lot of this, of course, will depend on developing enough soil fertility. The newly established Simple Garden was much more successful than I thought it would be in the first season. I've been impressed with the sheet composting method and enjoyed the overall ease of managing only a few staple crops. I did a lot of work last spring to establish the full garden, but in hindsight, I wish I had started only one bed each season to let the sheet composting, the ground cover, and the squash do the hard work. But it was nice to be able to harvest lots of onions, carrots, and potatoes as well as squash in the first year, and it will make the coming season a lot easier and more productive. The perennial garden is very much a work in progress. The fruit bushes, asparagus, and other perennial plants are growing well, and I expect them to be reasonably productive next year. With the help of a lot of ground cover fabric, I've almost rid the garden of scotch or couch grass, which I had allowed to become established a few years ago. Once this is cleared, I need to put more focus to plan the garden and to infill the spaces with additional crops. But the black plot is a much larger growing space, which forms the other half of this project, and I wasn't able to develop it as much as I had planned. As usual, a lack of time and focus were the key issues, but I was able to put up a new polytunnel just in time for the summer, and I was able to grow an abundance of cucumbers, tomatoes, and beans with it. I tried a new method of using ground cover fabric with planting holes burnt into them in order to manage the space of this polytunnel. This allowed me to get the crops into the garden faster, it reduced the watering needs, and greatly simplified the weeding and maintenance of this large growing space. But I did have a few fertility issues and need to develop the soil a lot more in the coming season. I learned about this method of using ground cover and tarps from a few other growers and plan to use it as a strategy for managing many of the other beds in this large plot. There is still so much to develop on this 1,000 square meter or quarter-acre plot and so much potential. Permanent windbreaks are definitely needed, but the temporary windbreak that I put up just before we were hit by the remnants of Hurricane Ophelia worked really well. In 2017, I produced over 4,200 kilograms of vegetables from all of the gardens that I have, a lot of which went to neighbors through a small honesty stand that I have set up. It is so great to be able to produce in abundance, to help feed my community, and to have people enjoy the vegetables that I work so hard to grow. Of course, I'm hoping to produce a lot more in 2018. I'm really keen to continue to develop the family scale trials to improve the productivity of all of the gardens, and to get to the point where I feel that everything is working well, as only then can I make any realistic comparisons between all the different methods that I'm trialing. I want to get the full growing space of the black plot cultivated and to put up another polytunnel if I can find the resources and the time. I also plan to produce many more videos as there is so much going on in this project that I want to share. So far I've had really great feedback about this YouTube channel and about my work in general, which has been really encouraging. It has made me a lot more confident that the method that I've chosen for producing these videos is the best way to share my experiences. One of these days, I hope to be able to fund all of the other explorations that I want to bring into this Red Gardens project and to earn a reasonable livelihood out of it all. As part of that, I really want to thank those people who've taken the step to become patrons. That kind of support is so wonderful to receive. If you like the work that I'm doing, please consider joining them by going to my Patreon page linked here or in the description below. As always, liking, sharing, and subscribing helps, but most importantly, thanks for watching.